Midnight ramen and last customer. The alley of lanterns. The last train had already left. Kenji Sato stared down the platform, cursing under his breath as the red taillights of the Marunouchi Line train disappeared into the dark tunnel. His watch read 12:07 a.m., the cruel reminder that another hour of overtime had chained him to his desk long enough to miss the final ride home. Shinjuku was still alive at this hour, neon buzzing, the air heavy with cigarette smoke and the faint perfume of cheap whiskey drifting from the izakaya bars. Crowds thinned, but not completely. Clusters of men in crumpled suits staggered out of karaoke boxes, hostesses clung to drunk patrons like shadows, and taxis prowled the streets like sharks sensing prey. Kenji rubbed his eyes. His stomach grumbled, he hadn't eaten since lunch. The thought of greasy convenience store onigiri or a cold bento box made him grimace. He wanted something warm. Something that tasted alive. That's when he noticed it. Down a narrow side street, where the fluorescent lights dimmed and the sound of traffic dulled, a faint red lantern glowed. It swayed gently in the night breeze, casting a soft halo over the alley. Painted across it in bold, black calligraphy were two simple characters, ramen. Kenji frowned. He had worked in this district for 5 years, yet he had never once seen a stall down that alley. He glanced around, no one else seemed to notice it. His hunger pulled him forward. The alley was narrow, the ground slick with rainwater and litter. The lanterns grew brighter as he approached, and soon he saw it, a small Yatai Ramen stall, wooden panels folding out neatly, a norin curtain fluttering at its entrance. Steam curled upward from a pot that bubbled with rich broth. The smell hit him instantly, pork bones, soy, garlic, something deeper, something that seemed to whisper of warmth and home. A man stood behind the counter, ladling soup with practiced movements. He was old, his hair tied back in a neat gray knot, his hands steady despite his age. His eyes, sharp and strangely luminous, flicked up when Kenji approached. "Welcome," the old man said softly. His voice was like a breeze rustling through dead leaves. "You've come at the right time." Kenji slid onto one of the stools. The stall was empty, save for him. The wood creaked beneath him, the lacquer chipped from years of use. He placed his briefcase at his feet, feeling oddly exposed beneath the red lantern light. "What'll it be?" the old man asked, though no menu was in sight. Kenji hesitated. "Show you, if you have it." The old man gave a thin smile. "I have exactly what you need." The words lingered strangely in the air, as though they carried more weight than a simple order. Kenji watched the man work. The broth shimmered in the pot, the noodles glistened as they were lifted and dropped into the steaming liquid. Slices of pork, green onions, bamboo shoots, all arranged with a delicate hand. Finally, the bowl was placed before him. It was beautiful. Steam curled upward, carrying an aroma that tugged at memories he couldn't quite recall, rainy childhood nights, his mother's kitchen, warmth against loneliness. He picked up the chopsticks. The first sip of broth was heaven. Rich, salty, layered with depth he had never tasted before. It was as if the flavor bloomed inside his chest, spreading warmth to every corner of his body. His fatigue ebbed. His hands stopped trembling. He felt whole again. Kenji closed his eyes, savoring. When he opened them, the old man was watching him closely, an odd glint in his gaze. "Good?" Kenji nodded eagerly. "Incredible. The best I've ever had." The old man's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm glad. It's rare to see a new face at this hour." Kenji frowned. "At this hour?" The old man didn't answer. Instead, he placed a small cup of sake beside the bowl. "On the house." "For staying late." Kenji hesitated, then drank. The warmth spread again, but sharper this time, like fire blooming in his veins. He blinked, the edges of his vision hazing. When he looked up again, he wasn't alone. 3 other customers now sat along the stall, though he hadn't heard them arrive. A man in a suit like his own, face downturned, eating silently. A woman in a faded kimono, her long hair draping to her chest, her pale fingers wrapped around chopsticks. And at the far end, a young boy with hollow eyes, slurping noodles without making a sound. Kenji stared. None of them seemed solid. Their outlines shimmered faintly, as if they were reflections in rippling water. He turned back to the old man, unsettled. But the vendor only continued to smile. Eat while it's warm. You don't want to be the last one. The vendor's smile. Kenji tried to steady his chopsticks, but his fingers trembled. The broth's warmth should have comforted him, but now it seemed to sink deeper, pressing against his chest like an unseen weight. He glanced sideways. The man in the suit, seated 2 stools away, ate slowly, slurping his noodles with a mechanical rhythm. His tie was crooked, his white shirt stained as though he had collapsed in it for days. His face was expressionless, his skin grayish beneath the glow of the lantern. Something about his movements unnerved Kenji, they were too deliberate, as if every gesture had been practiced and repeated endlessly. The woman in the kimono sat further down, her back ramrod straight, her hair draped down to her waist. It looked heavy, clumped together in strands that shimmered with oil. She ate without a sound, never lifting her eyes from her bowl. A faint perfume, old and musty, drifted toward Kenji, like incense left too long in a family altar. At the far end sat the boy. His small hands gripped chopsticks awkwardly. His head barely rose above the counter. He slurped with noisy eagerness, though his expression remained blank. When he paused to breathe, Kenji saw water dripping steadily from his school uniform, pooling at his feet. Kenji's throat tightened. He looked back at the vendor. The old man stood calmly, polishing a lacquered spoon with a rag that looked older than him. His eyes glowed faintly in the lantern light, sharp and bright like a cat's. New customers are rare, the vendor said softly, his gaze fixed on Kenji. Especially living ones. Kenji froze. Living ones, he repeated, his voice catching. The vendor tilted his head, amused. You should eat. It helps to keep the body warm, yes? Night can be cold. Colder than most realize. Kenji stared into his bowl. The steam rose in twisting patterns, the surface of the broth rippling faintly though he hadn't touched it. For a moment, he swore he saw faces flickering there, eyes wide, mouths open in silent cries. He blinked and the broth was smooth again. His stomach twisted. He wanted to push the bowl away, to leave, but his hands wouldn't move. It was as if an invisible weight pressed them in place. The suit-clad man finished first. He placed his chopsticks neatly across the bowl and stood, but instead of leaving, he bowed to the vendor and walked behind the stall. His form shimmered once, twice, and then vanished like mist under the sun. Kenji's breath caught. He twisted around. Nothing remained behind the stall but empty air and the faint outline of shadows clinging to the alley walls. The woman in the kimono rose next. Her long sleeves brushed the counter as she bowed low, her face hidden. Kenji glimpsed her pale neck, and for a split second, a dark bruise-like mark stretched around her throat. She followed the man's path, fading silently into nothingness. The boy lingered, his bowl still half full. He looked up for the first time, and Kenji's heart nearly stopped. His eyes were milky white, pupils clouded like glass. Water dripped steadily from his mouth as he gave Kenji a small, crooked smile. Then he slid from his stool, bowing clumsily to the vendor before walking behind the stall. His dripping footsteps left no sound. He too dissolved into the dark. Now only Kenji remained. The vendor leaned forward, resting both hands on the counter. His smile never faltered. "You eat well," he said. "Better than most who come here." Kenji swallowed hard. What were they? Who were those people? The vendor tilted his head, as if the question amused him. Customers, of course. Hungry souls. This stall feeds all who wander, so long as they find it. The living, the dead, it makes little difference. Hunger is hunger. Kenji shook his head. That's impossible. I saw them vanish. People don't just. They weren't people anymore, the vendor interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. Not in the way you mean. The man died years ago, on this very street, clutching his chest as he stumbled home. The woman hanged herself not far from here. The boy drowned in the river. They come back because hunger lingers even when breath does not. Kenji's mouth went dry. His chopsticks slipped, clattering against the bowl. Then, why am I here? The vendor's smile widened just enough to show teeth. Because you, too, are hungry. Deeper than you realize. You work until your bones ache, you live alone in a room too small for comfort, you drink convenience store beer and call it rest. You starve, not for food, but for something more. And so, you found me. Kenji pushed back from the counter. The stool scraped against the pavement. No. I'm not like them. I'm not. The vendor's gaze sharpened. Not yet. The lantern above them flickered, its glow deepening into crimson. The alley seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions, swallowing the distant city noise. The world outside the stall was gone. Only the stall, the lantern, the vendor, and Kenji remained. The old man gestured toward the bowl. Eat. The night is long, and you don't want to be the last customer. Kenji's chest tightened. He turned his head, desperate to run, but the alley twisted, a serpent coiling into darkness. There was nowhere to go. His chopsticks lay across the bowl, waiting. The broth still steamed, rich and fragrant, whispering promises he didn't want to hear. And the vendor kept smiling. The other customers. Kenji's breath fogged the night air, though the ramen stall felt far too warm for that. His suit clung damply to his skin, sweat beading along his spine. The vendor's smile remained fixed, unchanging. His eyes glimmered as if lit by some inner lantern. Kenji tried again, his voice trembling. I don't belong here. I shouldn't be here. This is some kind of nightmare. The vendor gave a soft chuckle. Nightmares are nothing more than truths we refuse to accept. He dipped the ladle into the simmering broth, the bubbling liquid releasing a wave of aroma that seemed to press against Kenji's skull. You wonder who they were, don't you? The others you dined with. Kenji's lips parted, but no sound came. The vendor set the ladle down and leaned his elbows against the counter, his posture casual, almost conversational. Do you wish to know? The stories of the hungry? Kenji's heart pounded. He wanted to say no, to shut his ears, to walk away, but something deeper, heavier, compelled him. Curiosity, dread, a need to know. He gave a slight nod. The vendor's smile sharpened. Then listen carefully. My customers leave pieces of themselves here, like stains on the counter. They are not gone, not entirely. I can show you. He reached beneath the counter, drawing out a small ceramic sake cup. Placing it before Kenji, he filled it with a liquid darker than any sake he had seen. It was black, glossy, yet shimmered faintly like oil on water. Drink, and see. Kenji recoiled. What is that? The vendor's expression didn't change. Memory. Nothing more. Or nothing less. Kenji's throat tightened. The last time he had obeyed, warmth had filled him. Now, dread crept up his spine. But his hand moved anyway, trembling as it lifted the cup. The liquid touched his tongue, cold, metallic, bitter. His vision blurred, the lantern's red glow spreading into streaks of crimson light. The alley melted away. He sat at the stall again, but the world around him had shifted. The man in the suit was there, his form solid now. His face, however, was twisted in pain, sweat dripping as he clutched his chest. He gasped, wheezing, the sound of choking breaths echoing in the stillness. His head hit the counter with a dull thud. The bowl before him rippled, though he never touched it. His eyes rolled back, glassy and lifeless. The vision flickered, and Kenji saw the woman in the kimono. She stood in a dim tatami room, the norin curtain of a ramen stall swaying just outside a paper door. Her face was calm as she tied the rope to the beam. Her eyes were hollow, resigned, but her lips moved, whispering something. A prayer? A name? Then her body dropped, swaying gently, her face hidden by cascading black hair. Another flicker, the boy now. He was at the riverbank, schoolbag slung over one shoulder. The water rushed high, swollen by rain. Children's laughter rang in the distance, but he was alone. He slipped on the rocks. The current took him before he could cry for help. His hand broke the surface once, twice, before vanishing beneath the waves. Kenji gasped. His vision cleared. The ramen stall returned, solid and red-lit. His stomach churned, bile rising. The vendor watched him with quiet satisfaction. Now you know. Kenji pushed back, nearly tipping his stool. They're dead. All of them. Why do they come here? To eat, the vendor said simply. The dead are hungrier than the living. Do you think hunger ends with breath? Do you think craving dies with the flesh? No. Desire lingers. Suffering lingers. And so they wander back here, night after night, bowl after bowl. Kenji shook his head. His pulse hammered in his ears. And me? Why am I seeing this? Why am I here? The vendor's gaze deepened, sharp as a blade. Because you share their hunger. You work yourself hollow. You drown yourself in loneliness. You swallow bitterness every day and call it life. The dead come because they cannot move on. The living come because they are closer to death than they realize. Kenji staggered to his feet. The alley loomed impossibly long again, stretching without end. He turned, desperate to flee, but something caught his eye. The stall was no longer empty. Every stool was filled. Men in suits with gray skin and lifeless eyes. Women in kimonos, students in uniforms, an old man with a cane, a mother cradling a child that didn't move. Their bowls steamed, their chopsticks lifted, but none made a sound. Rows and rows of faces, pale and sunken, eating endlessly. Kenji's breath caught. His vision swam. He counted, 10, 20, 30, too many for such a small stall. They crowded closer, their outlines shimmering like candlelight, their silent chewing the only sound. He stumbled backward, knocking into his stool. The vendor's voice cut through the silence, low and steady. Sit, Sato Kenji. Eat. You don't want to be the last customer. Kenji's knees buckled. The stool behind him caught his fall, dropping him back into place. His bowl still steamed before him, the broth dark and glistening. And all around him, the other customers ate, their pale faces never lifting from their bowls. A taste of the afterlife. Kenji's hands shook as he stared down at the bowl before him. The broth swirled lazily, shimmering like black glass. Steam rose in curling shapes, too deliberate, too lifelike. He swore he saw a hand reaching upward in the vapor, grasping, before dissipating into nothing. All around him, the stools were filled. Pale faces bent over bowls, chopsticks clicking in rhythmic silence. Their mouths moved, their throats swallowed, but the sound of slurping was muted, muffled, as if swallowed by the night itself. Kenji tried to stand again. His legs refused to obey. A dull heaviness spread through his muscles, like his bones had turned to stone. The vendor leaned closer, voice a low whisper against the clamor of silence. Eat, Kenji. The stall does not release its guests on an empty stomach. Kenji's pulse raced. No, he rasped. I'm alive. I'm not like them. The vendor tilted his head, the faintest shadow of amusement crossing his lips. Alive, yes. But the boundary is thin. A single bite more, and you may find yourself walking both sides of it. Kenji's stomach churned. Yet hunger clawed at him, deeper than before. It wasn't the simple ache of an empty belly, it was sharper, gnawing at his chest, his veins, even his thoughts. His body screamed for the food, even as his mind recoiled. With trembling hands, he lifted the chopsticks. The noodles slid between them, pale strands glistening. He hesitated, then shoved them into his mouth, desperate to silence the hunger. The taste was overwhelming. Rich, savory, deeper than anything human hands could craft. The flavor exploded on his tongue, and for a fleeting moment, bliss consumed him. He closed his eyes, letting it spread through his body like fire. Then the fire burned. It wasn't warmth anymore, it was cold flame, sinking into his chest, coiling around his ribs. He coughed, gagged, nearly choking as the noodles seemed to twist down his throat like living things. His vision blurred, the stall tilting, lantern light stretching into endless crimson lines. He slammed the bowl back onto the counter, gasping. His reflection rippled in the broth. It wasn't his face. A stranger stared back, skin pale, eyes hollow, lips tinged blue. His mouth opened in the reflection, though his own stayed shut. The reflection whispered soundlessly, mouthing words he couldn't hear. Kenji staggered back, but the vendor's voice bound him like invisible ropes. You see it, don't you? The face you'll wear when you've joined them. The stall has already begun its work. Kenji clutched his throat. His skin was clammy, his pulse faint. The air felt thinner, heavier, as though the alley itself pressed down on him. I don't want this, he croaked. I don't want to stay here. The vendor's smile never wavered. Few ever do. But hunger makes liars of us all. The customers around him stirred. One by one, they lifted their heads from their bowls. For the first time, Kenji saw their faces clearly. The suited man's eyes were sunken pits, his mouth frozen mid-slurp, broth dripping endlessly down his chin. The woman's neck still bore the rope mark, her tongue swollen and black. The drowned boy's skin was bloated, water leaking steadily from his nostrils. And yet, they all smiled at him. A terrible, knowing smile. Kenji stumbled back against the counter, heart slamming against his ribs. His hands gripped the wood, but the stall felt wrong, soaked, spongy, like flesh beneath the lacquer. He pulled back with a cry, wiping his palm against his trousers. The vendor leaned closer, voice low and patient. Eat, Kenji. Or the hunger will hollow you until nothing remains but an echo. Kenji's gut twisted. He wanted to run, but the alley still stretched endlessly in both directions, swallowing the city whole. No matter how hard he tried to imagine escape, the red lantern above loomed closer, larger, filling his vision. His hunger spiked again, stabbing through him like knives. His chest cramped, his throat dry, his lips cracked. The smell of broth was unbearable, calling, demanding, promising. With shaking hands, he lifted the bowl. He drank deeply. The broth poured down his throat like liquid night. It filled him, drowned him, carved him from the inside out. His vision whitened, then blackened, then flared red. When he slammed the empty bowl down, gasping, every customer in the stall turned in unison to face him. Their hollow eyes gleamed. Their lips curved upward. Kenji's reflection in the broth grinned back at him, though his own mouth stayed trembling, slack with horror. The vendor's smile widened. Good. You are almost ready. Last order. Kenji's pulse thundered in his ears. The broth still burned in his stomach, searing through his veins. His hands gripped the counter, nails biting into the wood that pulsed faintly, as if alive beneath his fingertips. The customers stared at him. Rows of pale faces, hollow eyes gleaming with wet hunger. Their mouths opened, noodles dangling like strings of flesh, but no sound came, just the wet sucking of broth, louder and louder, until it drowned out everything. Kenji staggered back. His stool clattered to the ground. "No, no, I won't." The vendor's voice cut through the silence, soft and terrible. "Last order." The lantern above flared, its red glow swallowing the alley whole. The air thickened, pressing against Kenji's lungs. He gasped, choking, as the world around him dissolved. The stall stretched outward, impossibly large. No longer a small wooden cart but an endless hall of counters and stools, filled with the dead. Rows upon rows of customers slurping, chewing, smiling with lips that dripped black broth. The smell was suffocating, decay mixed with garlic, rot tangled with soy. Kenji stumbled, clutching his chest. The hunger gnawed sharper now, tearing at him from the inside. His stomach cramped violently. He doubled over, gagging, but nothing came, only steam, rising from his throat like smoke. The vendor stepped from behind the counter, his thin frame towering impossibly tall now, his shadow stretching across the endless rows. His smile was no longer gentle, it was wide, jagged, teeth glistening like wet bone. His eyes burned with lantern light. "You've eaten well, Kenji. But the stall needs its balance. Someone must stay until the next night." Kenji's chest seized. "No. I won't stay here." The vendor raised a bony hand. The other customers rose in unison, their stools scraping in a deafening chorus. Their movements were stiff, marionette-like, their hollow gazes fixed on him. Kenji stumbled backward, slipping on broth that spilled endlessly from nowhere. The drowned boy stepped forward, water dripping in streams from his empty eyes. The woman in the kimono glided closer, rope marks darkening with every step. The suited man's jaw unhinged slightly, a rasping groan escaping at last. Kenji spun, looking for escape. The alley stretched infinitely, a tunnel of crimson lanterns, each one swaying though no wind blew. He bolted, feet slapping against wet pavement. But every step only brought him back to the stall. The red lantern swung above, the vendor waiting, chopsticks in hand. The broth still steamed on the counter, full again. Kenji froze, chest heaving. His reflection wavered in the bowl. His own face, only not his. His skin pale, lips cracked, eyes hollow. Dead. No, he backed away, trembling. "I'm alive. I'm alive." The vendor's laugh was soft, like wind through graves. "Not anymore." The customers surged forward. Hands grabbed at him, cold, wet, skeletal. They pulled him down onto the stool, his body stiffening as if bound by invisible ropes. His arms lifted, though he didn't command them. His hands took the chopsticks, dipped them into the bowl. "No!" Kenji screamed, but the sound dissolved into steam. The broth touched his lips. It burned like fire and ice. It filled him, hollowed him, replaced him. His vision dimmed, tunneled. He saw himself across the counter now, not flesh and blood, but pale and empty, slurping endlessly. The vendor leaned close, whispering with a smile that stretched impossibly wide. "Welcome to the stall, Kenji. Until the next wanderer comes, you are the last customer." The lantern flared once more. Then darkness swallowed everything.